everyone, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm very excited to do this podcast. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to touch on anxiety. And I cannot tell you how many clients I see for anxiety. I see men, I see women, I see children. I just in this week saw a baby that the mother realized as the baby was sleeping, it was jolting, waking up, and that's signs of anxiety. And so I thought I'd do some podcasts on anxiety. We will look at what can you do. We're going to look at what is anxiety. We're going to look at how do I usually treat anxiety, and then the spiritual components thereof. So this will be session 1 for the podcast for anxiety. As always, please note that I'm a quantum life consultant. I'm not a medically trained doctor. Should you display any worrying symptoms, please visit a doctor to assist you. This podcast is not for diagnosis or for treatment. If you really feel like you have a big problem, please visit a doctor. Okay, so we're going to kick off this session, and we will look first at how to manage and help yourself and others with the crippling effects of anxiety. If you don't manage anxiety, it will become crippling. It's like a snowball effect. You need to act quickly. Okay, so we're first of all going to look at what is anxiety, what's definition for anxiety. The anxiety definition that we use, first of all, you need to know it's an emotional response. Now we'll look a bit later in emotional response to what. We'll look a bit later at that. But first of all, we're going to say it is a feeling of worry, unease, foreboding, a generalized fear for no apparent reason, or an overreaction to a situation. Fear and anxiety are closely related, often as butterflies on the stomach or in the stomach, especially in children. Or a hollow feeling in the stomach. Children tend to express anxiety by saying that my stomach hurts, or you have a stomach ache. Also headaches. Headaches and stomach aches in children are often signs of anxiety. And if you say to me, but Natanya, many times it's just because they had too much sugar, you'll see later that sugar is an underlying cause to anxiety in the gut. So let's get started. Okay, so symptoms of anxiety. How do you know you struggle with anxiety, right? That's the first thing that we need to know. So first of all, you'll have headaches, stomach ache, fast heartbeats, sweat. I don't mean on a warm day, but, sweating like in the winter, dizziness, feeling jittery, muscle tension, especially in the neck and in the shoulders. The reason for that is the moment we start getting stressed, we tend to lift up our shoulders and we slouch forward. So if your posture is also doing that, it might be a sign of anxiety or being anxious. So make sure that your posture is well. Rapid breathing, panic attacks, obviously, constant nervousness, difficulty concentrating, irrational anger or irritability, restlessness and sleeplessness or insomnia. Okay, so symptoms that people often are unaware that have their roots in anxiety is ADHD. Often children struggle to concentrate because whatever the situation they're in, they are so anxious and so worried and so fearful that they would rather avoid the situation. So avoidance, ADHD, not being able to concentrate often is a symptom of anxiety. Anxiety can also be a symptom of ADHD. Fidgeting, people that cannot sit still. I used to be a teacher, some kids move their legs the whole time or click their pens. And what we actually realized as teachers is if you just have a fidget box, the kids will actually listen to you. So we had a little box and there was clay in my box and a ball and something that you can squeeze. So, and I always promoted fidgeting tools. So if you are a fidgeter, I would give you the thing to keep your hands busy so that you can concentrate on what I'm saying. Another thing that people don't often realize, perfectionism is a huge sign of anxiety. It's just someone that is high functioning and coping, and it looks from the outside as if they are okay, but actually they are doing everything perfectly and planning out their days in such a way because they cannot deal with the stress if something goes wrong and they still have their normal things to do. And so perfectionism, in psychology, they say perfectionism is the highest form of self-abuse. And so perfectionism often is a sign of underlying anxiety. People that are overworking, people that constantly work, that struggle to switch off, they're very task orientated, they will look after the job and doing the job and getting the job done before they worry about themselves. People that are not able to relax. I did a podcast yesterday and we were talking about this, that we were created to rest and people often struggle to rest. So not being able to relax, insomnia, overthinking, and guilt, constantly feeling guilty, constantly feeling as I said something wrong. Reading into people's behavior. Sometimes people really just don't have the time to reply. But then you start feeling guilty, thinking, did I do something wrong? Did I say something wrong? Did I act wrong? Did I do this? Maybe this is what bothered them. And actually nothing bothered the other person. You're just feeling guilty as an underlying cause of social anxiety often. Okay, so stress on your brain. So it's very important to realize that stress goes everywhere in the body. It does affect the brain. It affects your social abilities, your personal relationships, your job, COVID-19, money, bills, everything. It sits in the brain and you think, and then you start stressing. Okay, so this is our answer. Where does our anxiety come from? Often it comes from our minds. Often we think ourselves into the anxious situation. If you can just have the self-control to control your thoughts, to know your triggers, control your thoughts, focus on what is real, then you won't get as anxious as quickly. But let's look at where does anxiety come from. So first of all, it comes from trauma. People who have been traumatized, so the picture on the left is of a light shining through the person's brain, like trying to see what's going on. And you actually see that the trauma was in the childhood. So the childhood trauma often sits in the body for years and years and years, and it will sit there creating symptoms until you deal with it. And so even sometimes we are unaware of it. It can be in the subconscious mind, but it is there and it needs to be dealt with. And then obviously not all traumas happen to children. On the right-hand side, also there's trauma that happens as a grown-up. And so what happens with trauma is trauma comes, and if your life is a circle, trauma comes and it squiggles all over your circle. And so what happens is you now need to then focus to get your circle bigger. The squiggle doesn't really go away. You just learn to cope with it. You learn to deal with it. You learn to process it. You learn to make a positive thing come out of it. But leaving it alone will not help your circle get bigger. So your circle will stay scribbled as long as you don't deal with the trauma. The next thing is lifestyle. Okay, this is an example of a positive lifestyle. Taking care of your health, managing your time, making sure that what you put in your body is healthy, and getting exercise. The opposite of that is when you overwork, you don't sleep, you don't eat well, you tend to become very tired, you tend to become overwhelmed easily, you get anxious for almost everything, you get stressed for everything, your digestive system becomes a mess. And so everything in your life just feels as if it's hanging in the air and nothing is ever sorted out. The next thing is, of course, our environment. Okay, so if you think back to the epigenetics podcast that we did, we spoke about genetics and epigenetics. So you know how that works, and you know how the environment of your life can influence your genes and how that can then be passed on. So the reality of this is, if you don't sort out your environment and your anxiety, you'll probably pass it on to your children, to the next generation. And that's what we're trying to stop. So observing other people or being part of other people's sadness, trauma, a parenting style, being isolated. Sometimes, if you might be different, you might think different, you might act different, you might have different expressions. And as a child, that is difficult, because different doesn't always mean you are accepted. And that causes a lot of trauma and anxiety, especially in children. And then social expectations. Okay, let's see what else. Okay, so I spoke quickly about the epigenetics. Remember what I said the previous time, and this is the same picture that we used in the epigenetics session or podcast, is that while your grandmother was pregnant with your mother, the egg cell that formed you was already in the womb, in your grandmother's womb. And so just as with the smoking, anxiety can and will be passed down. Okay, I hope you guys learned something today. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope that you can join the rest of the course. Next time, we will be looking a bit more at what is anxiety in children and in babies, what is normal, what is not normal, and what you as a parent can do. Thank you so much, you guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.